Hey everyone, this is ThyWorm breaking down patch 0.7.7 for Last Epoch and giving first impressions after playing it for over 40 hours. Starting with new features. Shrines made their way into the game, adding yet another layer of interactivity and complexity to the game. Shrines appear in random locations both during the campaign and in endgame maps in the Monolith of Fate. Shrines offer various buffs which are triggered by simply interacting with the shrine by clicking on it. Some effects I found were increased crit chance, gold drops, mana regen, movement and action speed increase, unique items, crafting shards, and even a minion to aid you in battle in the form of an ice beetle shooting frost projectiles. I found during my travels that shrines stay on your character when you're traveling to a different zone. Shrines stack as well, which especially during the campaign gives you a nice power boost every now and then, and shrines are visible on the maps. It's cool, it's always a bit of a surprise what you're getting, but I was definitely excited each time I found a shrine. I'm sure this shrine system will be expanded in the future and if applicable also make their way into other endgame modules as soon as those are implemented. For now it is off to a good start and it works really well, at least conceptually. Then, character introductions. Last Epoch is rather light in terms of lore, or I should maybe say the implementation and focus haven't been much on storytelling so far, but more on core gameplay elements. Character introductions are a way to quickly familiarize yourself with the chosen class, and each of the 4 classes has their own animated voiced movie. It's a nice start to the game, and I noticed some of these stories intertwined, which is a nice touch. The mage had the acolyte as a student, for example, but suffice to say things didn't work out. Maybe raising the dead inside the mage's college had something to do with that. Steam cloud saves are implemented, which is great if you happen to play Last Epoch on Steam on multiple PCs. I don't imagine a huge player base does this, but you know, if you are, currently your progress will be saved across PCs, making your action RPG life a little easier. There are significant graphical updates in patch 0.7.7 with the overhaul to the lighting system. When it comes to graphical fidelity, lighting is one of the main features of a game. I have some modding experience, particularly with Skyrim, and after enabling a lighting mod the game looked 10 times nicer. It is no different with Last Epoch. It's truly a night and day difference and hard to describe, which is why I released a small 90-second highlight reel of the graphics. There are a few other things I noticed. For example, the number of destructible objects. It's kind of insane, the mayhem you can unleash in some of the rooms. Really impressive. And not in the least because the frame rate remains stable. A few months ago I couldn't even normally move through this area with all the archives. My frame rate would be horrible. And look at it now, I can move through the room, destroy everything in it, all in glorious 60 frames per second. Talking about performance, the game has been running really smooth for me. Chapter 7, the zones where enemies are fighting each other can still be a bit tricky in terms of frame rate, and some maps still suffer from frame rate drops, but it is less and less noticeable, and I'm sure we'll get a game at release that just runs smooth. This was a major concern for me a few months ago, where the whole thing ran really crappy, just abysmal performance, even with high-end systems like mine. These days it runs usually super smooth, especially with VSync enabled, which is a recommendation honestly, even if you don't see screen tearing. Somehow it helps optimization, at least for me and many others. All in all, performance in general got a big boost in patch 0.7.7. There's improved garbage collection, clearing unneeded data from memory, and these improvements reduce the stutters. You can set frame rates as well in the options, load times are shorter, and rampant enemies, a previous source of frame rate destruction, now cause way less issues. Let's talk about gear. The patch introduced 5 new item sets and 10 new uniques, and I'll touch on a few of those. I found 2 full item sets already. One of these, the Last Bear set, is a werebear leveling set with very decent stats that should carry you into the endgame without too many mana issues. Pebble's Playthings, a necromancer set, is okay-ish, but makes use of a weird distribution of elemental damage, with each piece giving a specific flat elemental damage to your minions. It makes sense in terms of playthings, but it doesn't make for any viable build, unfortunately. The Sunforged masterpieces are really strong endgame items that could give the Forge Guard some incentive to try forging weapons and aiming for fire damage. The other sets are for a Void Guard, and there is the Last Mountains Burial set. I haven't encountered those sets at all just yet. The uniques are also pretty spicy. Kermod's Cage, for example, is a high level werebear item that changes the fur of your werebear into white. You are now a polar werebear. I love it when uniques do these kind of silly things. Eric's Bones, a one-handed mace, seems pretty good for Reaper Lich crit builds. Elias' Signet can be used as a single item to cap your glancing blow, but only during channeling. Heirloom of the Last Nomad is a meme unique for some weird stun build perhaps. It does come with some pretty massive stats, however. Malin's Hubris converts all bleed to fire damage over time, allowing perhaps the use of bleeding items to proc fire damage, which opens up some nice options. For example, the Undisputed as a unique within a fire build. And the last one I found was Yusunui's Sphere, which in my opinion can create something extremely silly if you meet its requirements. Get an equal amount of attunement and intelligence, and these things start to spawn a massive number of orbs, which then increase your spell damage. I predict some ridiculous numbers, and I'm surely going to try and make a build around this and see if I'm right. There are more uniques, but I haven't found them all. Time to talk about skills, specialization trees, balancing and passives. New stuff first. The Lich got Drain Life as a skill, and I played a lot of Lich the last week. The skill is super fun. Expect a build soon about this new necrotic archetype. I've had no issues clearing the campaign or endgame content, and I'm confident in recommending you guys this build. Hopefully I'll have it available somewhere in the weekend. Smelter's Wrath is the new Forge Guard skill. It's this massive, slow, hard-hitting cone attack. Anomaly, the Void Knight skill was redesigned and got a new specialization tree. It is now a combo attack which can be cast twice, first on enemies and then again to trigger the effect. Cremate, an Acolyte skill, was temporarily removed in order to be reworked. No more burning corpses for a while. Additionally, Eterra's Blessing got a specialization tree as well. Up next, passives. I'm not going to cover everything here, just some highlights or significant buffs or nerfs. Starting with the Lich, which has Mind over Body nerfed. That used to give 40 intelligence, now only 20, which is still a lot. It did introduce Corrosive Consciousness, another damage over time node. In terms of skill balancing, 11th hour games made it harder to reach the max cap in skill levels, ultimately by around 33%. That is a big nerf, but I still found it's really not hard to reach max skill cap in endgame starting from scratch. It takes 4 monolith runs maybe, and you're back at level 20, which seems fair. Damned Ailments now stack, do only 50% damage however, and reduce enemy healing. Some Acolyte skill changes. Mark for Death got a big buff, trying to make the protection reduction capabilities a bit more viable. Flat reductions in enemy protections are generally speaking not very useful, because enemies at higher level have really high protection numbers, which means reducing these by 30 doesn't do an awful lot. A percentage reduction might make more sense, but so far we're not getting percentage based reductions, but number reductions. At least the numbers were pumped up, now reducing 100 protection per allocated point up to 500 protection reduction. It should help. Soul Feast got rebalanced. Generally speaking, the skill does more damage and has a bigger AoE effect, but ward generation from it has been nerfed. I guess the developers saw some community members walking around with 120,000 ward and thought maybe we should tackle this issue. I don't think those numbers can be achieved anymore, but we do have some crazy skillful community members that pull off wacky builds. I played with Soul Feast a lot this patch and it's still capable of providing very decent ward numbers. Without optimized gear, I've hit 5k to 8k ward rather consistently. Skeleton Warriors and Rogues received a buff. Skeleton Mage got flat spell damage instead of a percentage bonus, which should result in more damage as well, as most of your gear is also percentage based bonuses, which scale nicely off of flat damage. Mage skill changes. Focus got a big rework, but I never really used that skill, so I won't comment on it. Glacier damage got nerfed across the board, shame, because it was a very decent leveling skill. Mana Strike now has a node that auto-targets enemies, which is quite useful actually. Primalist changes. Entangling Roots got nerfed. Once again, players were abusing this skill a lot, so the nerfs are warranted. It's now more expensive, the radius is reduced, the damage is reduced. Basically everything this skill ever did has been nerfed. I don't know if it's still viable, I haven't tried it yet. I think it's still fine seeing how powerful it was. It is a big nerf though. Tempest Strike got buffed, Werebear got nerfed a little bit in tankiness, with Ursine Heart granting a bit less armor and protections per point and also less points that can be allocated. I played Werebear a lot though, I made a guide for it as well. I did a few monolith runs in 0.7.7 and guys, Werebear is still completely fine. Sentinel changes. Abyssal Echoes now skills with spell damage. Abyssal Orb got reworked, with its base damage increased by 67%, but the added damage effectiveness reduced by 50%. The skill gets more front-loaded this way. Erasing Strikes got buffed by 25%. Forge Strike as well, also by 25%. I tried to make a build around summoning an army of weapons with Forge Strike in the previous patch and failed miserably. I may give this another chance with the new set items and this buff, but so far I have found Forge Strike rather underwhelming. Holy Aura got buffed, Judgment got buffed by 25%, Ring of Shields got reworked. It basically does more damage and scales with damage over time and spell damage. The protective values have been nerfed, however, with less block chance, less protections and less point allocations possible in defensive nodes. In terms of item balance, there's been a big change. Base spell damage exists no more, and it is now adaptive spell damage. The adaptive part lies in the fact that this spell damage adapts to whatever spell damage type you are using in the spell you're casting. It's flat damage, and if I use an Abyssal Orb, it is flat void damage, because Abyssal Orb is a void spell. Caster weapons become a bit more versatile, I guess, and flat damage is generally good. I just haven't been able to properly dive into it. Let's talk some idols. The ones that gave ward on hit have been nerfed. Ward builds across the board have been nerfed a bit with all these changes, which seems reasonable. They were very strong. To be fair though, a new glass idol got introduced that provides ward when spending mana, which I'm sure gets abused in the future as soon as people are able to break it. If you like gambling, Last Epoch got you covered. Regarding uniques and idols, you can't buy them at vendors anymore, but uniques can still be gambled. Idols you will have to grind. Gambling costs have been nerfed, however, it's now 50% more expensive. I gambled around 800,000 gold away already in this patch, so I can confirm it is indeed quite expensive now. Minor item changes to conclude this section. Health potions on full life are no longer picked up if you have the max capacity of health potions already. That's nice because then they are there at a later time when you may need them. Apparently, loot has been rebalanced, breakable objects drop less, monsters drop more, uniques and set items drop rates have been adjusted, nerfed by 17%. I did still find plenty of those, however. Mana regen can now roll on scepters, which is great and makes a lot of sense. Then, the user interface. You can now adjust the minimap zoom. The only drawback is that your preferences aren't saved yet, but I'm sure this will be implemented in a later patch. The overlay map can be adjusted as well, both in terms of opacity and zoom level. I love this change, as I usually have this map up in campaigns and the Monolith of Fate to either rush the campaign or clear out the entire monolith. The action bar UI has been redone and it's really nice. I love the art style, the icons, the creatures on top of the health and mana globes. It's classic but stylish. Crafting got a little bit easier, because now the modifiers you used last, like a Glyph of the Guardian, remain in the same slot. Before you had to reselect everything after a forge, but this isn't longer necessary. It's nice because now your 95% success rate items break even more quickly and you're saving yourself a lot of time. There's also a neat new layout concerning the crafting tab, which shows your materials in a more orderly fashion than before. For example, I can now see I have over 14,000 crafting shards, although that really doesn't help me much, other than the conclusion that I probably have the shard I'm looking for. The crafting UI now also has a better description of shards, which is useful when crafting for new players. It now clearly indicates what specific shards do, whether they either give a percentage based buff or increase the flat numbers. Both the arena and monolith UI seem darker than before, making everything a bit more grim, a bit better eligible, and overall it's a much nicer look, I think. Then some random smaller changes. Regarding profanity, there's now a filter you can disable. Looking at the idle pouch, it's much clearer which slots you have unlocked. Previously this was hard to see. Menu buttons also display the assigned keybinds, making it easier for people to learn which keybinds open up different menus. The chests got a small overhaul too. They used to be more of a Zelda style RPG chest, now they're flatter and squarer. I really have no opinion on this. Totems got an overhaul. They look good. I noticed that quite a few enemies have visual updates now as well, indicating area of effect or when they will explode. It's really helpful and very visible, which may save you a few deaths if you pay attention. Streamer mode is now a thing, where the game essentially turns down resource usage, so you can still use the same PC to stream the game without blowing up your rig. I haven't streamed yet, but normally the fans would go crazy whenever I did. the PC fans, not my audience. I may stream this again at some point, but I would rather make YouTube content really. Still, for others, this may be a great option. Then there are 43 sound changes, 14 visual changes and more than 100 bug fixes, and I'm not going over all of that. I do want to highlight the changes to the Primalist, who's been reworked, probably as part of the first project of the new animation lead within 11th Hour Games. Look at me zooming smoothly through the maps, it's cool, right? I think the animations look good, definitely better than before, so good job, new lead animator at 11th Hour Games. Good job in general, by the way. I'm writing this script, I'm like 6 pages in, and these are just the highlights. I've had so much fun with this patch so far. Look at the massive amount of new content, guys. It is insane, the work these devs are doing. With these constant, consistent, new content patches and additional hotfixes right after deployment, this game will be exciting and very playable all the way up to the launch at the end of the year. There's no doubt in my mind anymore that they will solve the remaining issues for the majority of the player base and deliver a true classic loot-based action RPG in due time. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this overview. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all real soon. Love you all. Bye bye.